found that you all were interested in my story. So anyhow, we emigrated in 1957. So the emigration story is very different now. And before you go, you first have to take all kinds of health tests. And I remember that my friend, who also had emigrated, she had a little boy and he was 2 years old and he didn't speak yet. And so they said, you can't come. But I could come. I had no problem. Now the reason the government supported us, they wanted us to emigrate away from, they said, okay, you can go to Canada, you can go to America, you can go to Australia and New Zealand, whatever, but leave this country, because what happened is Rotterdam was bombed by the Germans. The Hague, where I come from, was bombed by the Allies by mistake. And then they had an Atlantic wall that they were building all across the coastline. And they moved all the people away from there, so they didn't have any houses. On top of that, we lost our colonies. Indonesian was our colony, and the Indonesians had a choice whether they wanted to be Dutch or if they wanted to stay in Indonesia. And so they had a big group of Indonesians coming back to Holland who had never lived there and didn't know how cold it was. But that's a different story. So that was why the government encouraged us to say, go emigrate. And of course I was just married and stupid. And so I said, okay, let's go. Because the choice was, either my husband was a naval officer, and he either could go to New Guinea, and I just found out that we kept New Guinea till 1950, so that's 5 or 6 years after the war. And I didn't realize that, because I thought he lied. But he said, we can either go to New Guinea or we can go and we go to America. So I chose America. Now, my father, and I know that Joost knows about it, my father was a great admirer of Karl May. Karl May was a German guy who wrote about Indians, and he had never been in America, but boy did he write about them. And the chief of the Apaches was Winnetou, and his sidekick was Old Shatterhand, who must have been white. But he was just, even when he died, he still believed in Winnetou. And so when we arrived in New York, okay, when you arrive in New York, you have to have a custom agent, and you have to get a guy that opens your cases, you know, and we had a lot of them. So when I got one, I didn't get the other, you know, so we were just waiting and waiting to get the two guys together, because they wanted to open it with the customs looking into it. Well, that was my first impression of America. We had some friends that were welcoming us. And he said, what the heck, what is going on? And he said, well, we can't get the two guys together. And he said, oh, I'll take care of that. And so he gave him a bottle of bourbon, and we rolled into it. We had all the amenities that they could afford, and we had all these big crates, and they shipped them straight to Seattle. So that was not a very good impression. But it is true. So then we took, from New York to Seattle, it's 4 days and 4 nights in the train. If you ever want to do that, go ahead. But I don't, we did not have a sleeping couch, or we couldn't afford that, so we just hang around, I guess. And we made one big mistake because we came in Chicago and we decided to explore Chicago, and you never do that around a train. So we flew right back into the train because it wasn't very safe. Okay, so that is, and I often think, in Holland the education, because Holland is so very small, if you go east, you speak German. If you go south, you speak French. If you go across the water, you have to speak English. So in Holland, except for your own language, you always have 4 languages. So, and then I was stupid enough to try Greek and Latin too, because I thought I was good. But by the time they got the Greek irregulars, I was still struggling with the regular verbs. So I didn't quite see that. Okay. When we arrived in Seattle, we were sponsored by the Olympic View Community Church, who were very, very, very nice, except they were not at the station. Nobody was there, they were having coffee or whatever, I don't know. Nobody was there, but Ed said, oh, I know how to take care of it, and so we called, and then they came running in with a big sign, welcome Aaron, and that was a mistranslation of Ed's name. He meanwhile had changed his name from Edward Arends, which is a seabird, kind of a sea eagle, but they made it Aaron, so we felt very Christian, and we came. On top of that, we were sponsored by a church. Okay, so our friends in New York took us immediately for apple pie à la mode, because you don't do that in Holland. You have a pastry, and that's it, and you certainly don't ruin it with a blob of ice cream.
Yeah, there you go.
that was our first introduction there. And then, what is the next one? Oh, yeah. They put us in a house, in a very tiny little house on East 100. And that was very nice. They furnished it with all donated furniture from the church. And then they came and visited us. Now, I don't know if you remember that in that time, whatever, everybody had glasses with diamonds, and everybody had a perm, and everybody was gray, and everybody was named Mary. And so they kept on coming because they wanted us to feel very welcome, you know. And so after a while, we served them coffee and tea and even breakfast, you know, whatever came in, we felt we should be really nice to them. And so we welcomed everybody, but then it kind of, the news trickled. So we got all kinds of salesmen. And they wanted to sell us TVs, and they saw that we didn't have an antenna, and I don't know what all, the cars. And we would host them. And then afterwards they would do their spiel, and we said, oh, no, that's not what we thought. We thought you were from the church. Because everybody looked the same. Anyhow, and yeah, I even one time, and that was a really shocker for me, cultural shocker, because they also were very proud of having their hair nice, and one person came in with her pink rollers in her hair, and don't do that ever, you know. And Holland is very prissy as far as that is concerned. Okay, so that was a story. And then people were extremely, extremely nice to us. Oh, I found a job, and I'm still very good at it, in the yardage department. Of course, that's what you want when you know meters and kilometers and all that, then you want to go to the yardage department. That's still number one in the family. I can still translate. And then I got in a conflict because there was a lady that wanted a thimble. Now the name of a thimble in Dutch is fingerhoed, finger hat. And I had no clue what a thimble was. And I didn't have a dictionary, and the woman got so mad at me that I didn't know. And she even went to my supervisor. I don't know, but I almost lost my job, I thought, but I was paid $1 an hour. And the men were paid $1.25 because Ed was working in the toy department of the Bon Marché, and he told me, we will never have kids. Because they all park the kids in the toy department and they break them apart and I'm just repairing them. So I said, okay, you better get a different job. So he did. And then the other people would come over to Ed and they say, you know, we know a real nice Dutch lady. Maybe you should approach her and get acquainted, you know. And Ed said very casually, oh no, I've already slept with her. And yeah, he did it. Anyhow, that was another thing. And then we decided, we were great admirers of ice hockey, and Ed was an ice hockey player. So we went to the arena here and we went to look at ice hockey. Now, one of the opponents made an unbelievable move. Now in Holland, when anybody does something unbelievable, you applaud. So we were booed. Because you only cheer for the home team. You don't do that ever. So that was a different thing that we didn't realize. Oh, and then we needed to get health insurance. So I go to group health, and they tell me, you have to take your clothes off. Oh, that makes sense, right? So I happily dance into the room in my altogether, which is beautiful at that time, you know, I was young. And they got a heart attack, and they told me I had to go back and put something flimsy paper all over it. They were not impressed with my uniform. So, yeah, that was, and then, years later, when I was in my 40s, see, I'm old, and I went to Holland. Now, in Holland, the doctor lives in his own house, and he has one room, and you go there and you take your clothes off and you walk up to him. And I looked at him and I thought, huh, I knew I was an American then, because he was my age and he was in his 40s and I didn't like it. So yeah, that was an American coming home. Then we had the food. My dream was during the war that I would someday eat a whole chicken. We tried everything, you know, but there was no chicken, of course. There was nothing there to eat. So I avoided chickens here because I thought they were too expensive. And then my friend said, why don't you ever buy chicken? And I said, well, it's very expensive, because that was the idea that I had. So I went to the store and they were 10 cents a pound. And I thought, my friends are coming to visit, I'm gonna buy 10 pounds. And I opened it up, and those crazy American chickens only have backs and necks. And we ate them all. I ate them all up. And then I came came home and I found another thing. I said, you know, these crazy Americans, they put a chicken in a can. And so I said, that's easy, I'll buy a can of chicken. And I opened it, and it was a substance that we don't know in Europe at all, shortening. It had a nice picture of the fried chicken on the outside. I often think about Asian people. How in the heck do they manage? Because they, for one thing, their language is much more difficult. They have a different alphabet and all that. And you know, it's very difficult to adjust. But well, these are just a couple of my thing. And then, and then one of the favorite dishes here in America is Jello. At that time, the 60s, you have Jello, all kinds of Jello, green, red, whatever, purple. And now in Holland, that's a treat. And so I thought, well, I'm going to eat some Jello. But the Americans put mayonnaise on it. We put whipped cream on it. I mean, it is a treat, right? So that was a shock, and then we visited some other people, and they said, do you want a beer? And we said, yes, we would love a beer. And it was root beer, and it tasted like moth water. And we had to be polite. So do you know what it is? So these are all things that you don't think about. When you go to America, you know, I had been in France, I had been in Germany, I did an internship in France, and so I thought I was a world traveler, you know, and then we came to America, and that was a completely different thing. And then we got a baby shower, because by now we are expecting, and we don't know baby showers at all. And they gave Ed a huge diaper pail, pink, and that was his present, and we got all kinds of clothes we were not familiar with. A lot of the stuff that we got, we didn't know what to do with. But anyhow, that was another thing. And then somehow we went camping. Now, Ed always did the diapers. I think it was a way for him to get away from me, because he would go in the basement and he had a whole thing going. You rinsed it there, or you first went to the bathroom and you rinsed it there, and then you had a rinse, and because we could save all the water. I don't know how that went. You pumped it out, and then you had used soapy water, and then he would go and put it in another. Well, I think he just wanted to read, and that's why he was sitting there, but he said diapers are for me, and then we went camping. So he very proudly hooked up his pink diaper pail on the back of our Volkswagen. And so they were rinsed by the time we got to the place, right? And yeah, he was very clever as well. But then we went to Eastern Washington, and it was so hot. It was just unbelievable. Now in Holland, when you buy ice cream, you buy a cone, and you call it ijsje. Little piece of ice. And anything that is small in Dutch is je. Tomje. Little Tom. You know, things like that. Anything that you can think of. You put je behind it. So I said, oh God, I want ice. I want ice. How long are we going to drive? And we didn't know it was that hot in Eastern Washington. But we were going camping with diapers. And here I see this huge thing, and I said, ice! Look at that! It says ice! So I said, okay, you got a quarter? And so we put it in, and there came this huge block of ice. And then I thought, oh, I did it wrong. it says party ice there. So I put a quarter in there and then I got all the ice cubes. We had lots of ice. But it are just things that you never think about, that people from other countries, just meet. And then what else was there? I think that's, oh no. I wanted to introduce you guys to the Indonesian rice table, which is something very well known in Holland. We eat a lot of Indonesian food. And the rice table is, you take rice, and it originated on a banana leaf, and then you just put anything with it that you want to mix with it. But by the time the Dutch were there, it was very elaborate, and you can have like 40 side dishes and mix them with them, you know. So that is quite a story. Well, I wanted to show my guests that their first introduction to Indonesian food, because you didn't have any Indonesian food here at all. And so I was going to show them shrimp crackers. And the shrimp crackers are about this big. And then you put them in hot oil and they flour. They are so big that, you know, you don't, and they're crisp and really good. So I thought I'm going to show them that, and I'll heat up the oil, and I had the oil heating. And then we had adopted a cat, which later on did not belong to us, but that is a different story. And that cat was going crazy. He was jumping up and down and up and down and up and down. And what the heck is the matter with that cat? And well, then I opened the display for my guests, and it was a deep fried mouse. We didn't have cuckoo. That's the name. So that's some of my stories. And I told Anne McCracken if she would come, she would definitely want to emigrate after this tour. But that's all I have. So. Lots and lots of stories, of course.
Susan, did the government help you move over? Did they pay you to move your family to move?
The government helped, yeah. But I don't know any about finances.
Was there a list that you had to
Oh,
get
yeah.
on then?
Yeah, well, we were kind of stupid because, or at least I was, we were on a scooter going past the American embassy. And Ed said, let's sign up for emigrating. And I said, okay, that's fine. The waiting time was 8 years. And I thought, well, by that time, you know, he doesn't want to emigrate anymore, or something like that. But when we came there, they had all these special acts for, and Ed filled our name. He's born in Indonesia. So he filled in that he was an Indonesian refugee or whatever, and I was a war victim, and he was too, and so we had all these lists. Well, everybody else did that too, and within 4 months, we were on the top of the list. But then his father suddenly died, and so we stayed longer. And then the Olympic Futures wrote us, whenever you come, we will still sponsor you. So that's why we came after we got married, because we weren't even married. And so that was a different story. And I can tell you, we came totally unprepared for emigration, because all I had was silver and porcelain and all my wedding gifts, and they kind of don't work when you emigrate. You need something more basic. So that was another touch.
So was it the fact that the church was sponsoring you that got you to Seattle? Or was there any other reason?
No, we had to pay for that. We paid for the train.
Yes,
And
but I mean, why did you come to Seattle instead of, say, Carson City, Nevada?
Oh, no, Ed had decided, and he was about 20 years wrong, but he thought, he also had a merchant marine license. And he thought that the West Coast would open up for Asia. And it never did, while we were struggling at that time. So he finally ended up going to Boeing and being an aeronautic engineer there. So yeah, he had chosen Seattle. We had never heard of Seattle. Nobody ever in Holland had heard of Seattle. That was something out of a book, you know. Who knew about Seattle? You know about New York. But like I say, it was an entirely different story. We were welcomed with open arms by everybody. I even sang in the choir. Yeah, I was quite a participant of the church, which I'm not churchy, so that was another thing, but it was fun. So we had some real nice friends there.
When did you become a U.S. citizen?
I waited a long time because the social services in Holland are so darn good that if I would go back, say that Ed would have an accident, and I would go back to Holland, I would be taken care of. They even give you a house, they give you everything, you know. The social services are just beyond imagination, because they're socialist. And so I thought I'd wait until I know for sure that Ed is not having any accident, and until I got my master degree and all that stuff, so I could, you know, I could make a living. And so I did not, I think I turned an American in '92. I waited a long time. And of course, and then we were transferred to Oklahoma. I don't know if you remember, at one time there were no jobs here at all, and they told you the last one here turns off the light or something like that. And nobody wanted to go to Oklahoma. And we, not knowing what Oklahoma was all about, we said, of course we go. So we came to Oklahoma, and I hate to tell you this, but it was a culture shock. And it's an entirely different environment that you can think of. But it was interesting. They always thought that I was, you know, special because no Dutch person is ever going to emigrate to the middle of the country because we need water, you know, we need to see water, and so they thought I was very special. And I'm sure that a lot of the excuses were made because, you know, I'm used to speaking up. And I think you know that. When I don't like something, I tell it. and my kids have a different story though. They said, yeah, you were a problem sometimes. But that's their view. I mean,
When did you come to Guaymas, Susan?
68.
What brought you? Yeah, what brought you?
Well, Holiday Hideaway was going bankrupt, and they had big advertisements in the Seattle papers. And we had looked at Whitby, and we couldn't afford it. At that time, it was already, well, we didn't have much money, and so we decided to see what Guaymas was all about. And we are driving around, and that was when the old way, there was no highway, I-5 wasn't there, so you had to wait for the bridges and whatever. It took a long time. And then we went to look at Holiday Hideaway, and I could just see myself sitting on a rock there and looking down. So that's not what I had in mind. So, and the kids were with us, And I told him, I said, well, he said, I like to look around a little further. And I said, well, I've had it. Just dump me with the kids at the beach. And there at the beach came a man with a huge horse and a lassie dog. And his name was
Horse Hamill.
Horsey Hamill?
Horse.
Yeah.
Hamill. And he looked like a bag lady. And he had these crazy stories.